It's official. It's a new era with the Seattle Kraken. Ron Francis steps down. This is huge. Let's talk about it right here and welcome on into the first episode of the Frozen Deep, a Seattle Kraken podcast. And we waited. That's what we did. We just waited to start this podcast until Ron Francis steps down. Now we're officially in a new era, not just for the Kraken, but for the Frozen Deep for this podcast. I'm Christian Rao, Gavin Height here. This is powered by Up West Sports. Ron Francis no longer going to be the Seattle Kraken's president. He's stepping away. He's stepping down. Call it mutual if you will. I think we all know that this is probably a little bit more on the non-mutual side, but we can go on the respectful ways. That's fine. There's a lot that he did for this organization. I think there's a lot of criticism as well. Obviously, he's had his hands from the very beginning to it. Gavin, what's your overall take? No longer Ron Francis being a part of the front office in Seattle.
Well, first of all, the Frozen Deep has been a long time coming. Christian and I have talked Seattle Kraken and just hockey in general for, I don't know, gosh, it's been 7-8 months in the running. Yeah. And we've been trying to wait for the time and the bandwidth, and we found a perfect opportunity here with turning a page and Ron Francis leaving. It says stepping down. I'm assuming it's forced resignation. It says, "Hey, do you want 1 to the head or 5 to the chest?" So I think, I think he took the 1 to the head route and just did the honorable thing here. I can't say that guy was a complete failure as a GM, because there was one thing that he did really well. I know I'm starting with the positives here. He did really well in the trades. I thought he got really good value in the trades to get good draft picks, to even get some good players. Capo Caco was a really good pickup. Eli Tolvanen kind of turned around his career when we picked him up. And I actually, that one wasn't a trade. I believe it was a waiver pickup. But there was a couple good things that he had done. However, this whole thing started with the expansion draft, and Ron Francis might not have been the best guy for this expansion draft. There was other players still left on the table. Ryan Getzlaf was one of the ones that we were just kind of thumbing through, like, could this team have been different? I hate coming to a conversation saying there's this problem, but I don't have a solution. So I don't have the end-all solution, but Ryan Getzlaf was one that we left on the table. He was unprotected by the Anaheim Ducks, and we took Trevor Carrick instead. So yeah, there's some other things here that started from the base fundamental, and then all the way up until Morgan Geekie. You see him take off and become insanely good with another team. What did that look like? Christian, actually, that's my question to you. Do you think that was the line that he was playing with, or the game that they were asking him to play?
Yeah, and you could call that for coaching. You can call that on him before he got the promotion to president when he was the GM, or was it game plan? Yeah, there's a lot of things there, but he's doing really good in Boston now. And I think that's the most frustrating part, because that he can potentially do that. And then you think about all these younger players that are just not shining right now. And of course, the two that come to mind are Matty Bernays and Shane Wright. And you're like, okay, these are the guys that you want to obviously step up. And Shane Wright's been all across trade rumors over the last 2 seasons. And you wonder if he's just being the fall guy when it comes to game plans and things like that. There's a lot of things that need to get changed this offseason. I was calling for this. I was hoping it would happen. I mean, just earlier this week, we had a phone call. I was just ranting about you, asking us, like, what is the difference? What is Ron Francis and Botterill doing here? Why are they both in the seat? And for the record, for Botterill, he's sticking around. And some people might not like that. Some people might think, I want a completely clean house. They might not like the fact that Botterill might have actually been seen as a quote unquote promotion here, kind of like what Ron Francis got last year. But it looks like they're just going to take more of a traditional route, and Bots is going to take the whole thing. He's getting seen as the executive vice president and the GM. So he's going to be running it all. And look, if he was the one that was more in charge of this season as the GM, bringing over McMahon, that was a great trade. Although it didn't work out, and after the Olympic break, the Kraken completely fell apart. But it wasn't part of him. He wasn't the reason behind it. There was other reasons. If McMahon can stick around, or if they find a way to keep him in the offseason with the money they have, and with all the other UFAs and RFAs they have as well, this is a perfect opportunity. Whether they bring somebody else in to work with Botterill, or Botterill gets free reign and the green light to go cook and go get things done to get them back at the top of the Pacific Division. Not that that's a hard thing to do right now, based on how the Pacific Division looks. I just sent you a text earlier this week, and I said, in the Eastern Conference, this is a real stat, by the way. The Columbus Blue Jackets are sitting 12th in the Eastern Conference as of a couple of days ago. This might be a little different. They would be leading the Pacific Division, and they're
Unreal.
12th in the Eastern Conference, 3 spots out of the playoffs.
Well, and it's crazy because
leading the Pacific.
30, what was it, 20, 30 games into this season, the West was completely packed, or the Pacific Division was completely packed with great talent. Even the Sharks were like on top of the world. And everybody was kind of fighting for that top. And then you just see the absolute plummet of this whole thing. One of the big things I really wanted to talk about the adios to Ron Francis is, you love Matty Beniers. He was a great pick at the number 2 overall spot. However, you went out and got a team of facilitators and no goal scorers. And McCann kind of stepped into that box, but you can't have just one goal scorer. And you can't have, 10 facilitators, one hustle guy, and then one goal scorer. That's just not, it's just not conducive to the efforts. You got to find at least 3 or 4 top tier goal scorers that are going to put you, 30 plus goals a year, or maybe at least 25 goals per year. And so I go back to Beniers was a great pick, but man, we needed the goal scorer. We needed the goal scorer in that draft. And I know there's some other great names, and I'm just frustrated that we go out and get Chandler Stevenson. We pay him $6+ million, and he's another facilitator. He's not a goal scorer. And it's just, what is the thought process here? Why is pucks in the net such a hard concept for Ron Francis and company? And maybe that's why he's on the way out. But I guess I digress to get back to moving forward. Christian, what do you see kind of moving forward? Botterill, correct me if I'm wrong, was with the Sabres before here.
He was, yeah. He was the GM with the Sabres for a little bit of time, and he was actually a big deal who facilitated the Eichel trade that involved many big names, Alec Tuck being one, who's going to be a UFA this offseason, one of the biggest UFAs, I think. So what I'm looking for is, I think they have to be super aggressive. They have to. And I don't know if that's a Jason Botterill question or if that's more of an ownership question. Ownership really hasn't been willing to dish out all that cash yet. Are they finally ready to make that move? Now that they finally have said, hey, with 5 games left to go, we're going to make a change, something we've never done before. We're going to move on from Ron Francis. Is this finally saying, with ownership finally saying, we thought we were going to get a lot more from Ron Francis. The 2023 playoff run, that was fun. Don't get me wrong. Got out of the first round. That was super exciting. That lit up the entire fan base of the Kraken. I think it kept them around, especially because of how great Vegas was their first initial year. Seattle didn't do that year 1, but year 2, they finally found a little bit of hope. But then after that, it kind of just fell apart, right? So I would like to see them to be super aggressive. I really like what Minnesota and Bill Guerin does, right? I mean, he's been super, super aggressive, getting in Quinn Hughes and obviously signing some big-time names as well. Minnesota is obviously a completely different world when it comes to the hockey sense, but there's no reason why Seattle can't be that. The fandom is wild. For lack of better terms, since I was talking about Minnesota. But I mean, obviously it's such an important place, and I think they really can get to where it needs to be. I think they have to go really strong here, and it might cause some fan favorites to leave, making some of those trades, moving on from some of these UFAs coming up, Schwartz, Tullivan, Olenzik, Murray, even there's Melanson's a restricted free agent, but maybe potentially moving on from him as well. There's a lot of other names that you can move on from. And McMahon is technically a UFA as well, coming over as a rental, but I'd love to have him back. I think he fit the system really well. And I think he's going to be somebody who is potentially going to be asking for a lot of money. But if you build around him and maybe one other person for your first line and have that facilitator as Matty, as your center, then I think you're onto the right path, and you have a ton of money to work with this year and a lot of open spots. So, and look, I've seen this as well. I've seen this across a lot of different media outlets. People say we have a top 10, farm system, if you will, prospect levels. What are we doing with them? Got to make some moves, got to bring them up, got to let the young guys play. I think they're not doing anything, just sitting down there with the Firebirds, although they're making the playoffs. You got to find a way to make some moves here, and aggressiveness is what has to happen. I am looking for a damn near fire sale to the point just to light a fire this offseason. I think they have to be the most aggressive team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and the time of ice for Shane Wright has really bummed me out.
He was scratched the other night.
It just, yeah, he's been a healthy scratch. He's third line, fourth line. They're just putting him out there when they can. You got to recognize that the guy can score goals, and you gotta try and use that to your advantage. But I guess one of the questions that I did want to ask you, I'll give my opinion first. Just so everybody out there listening knows, I am a Lane Lambert fan. He came in very well organized and got this team in the right direction. I think he's the FU guy that we kind of need right now for a team that needs a push in the right direction. But I wanted your opinion with Botterill getting full claim of throne right now. Is there a chance that Lane Lambert is gone and we're on to a fourth coach in 4 years?
I don't think it should. I think the fact that Botterill came in as the GM last year, Lane Lambert came in, I think they should be tied to the hip. I don't think that they should move on from Lane Lambert. I don't think he's the issue. I don't. And although they had a terrible slide after the Olympic break here, and although you have to point it in some direction, I think he obviously deserves some of the criticism, no doubt. I think he is still the right coach to turn it around. I do think he has what it takes. And hearing him in the pressers, hearing him in the post-game or pre-game sounds, however you want to talk about it, I think he gives the right answers. I think he protects his players to the amount that he has to, but he also is not afraid to show criticism and make sure that they let them know that he's paying attention and he's not going to always protect them, out there. Like he's got a good balance in there. They asked him the other day about like, what do you think is actually going wrong? Like wanted a deep dive question. He just straight up said, he's like, I'm going to pass on that question. He knew what he was doing. I think he's a very smart coach. And I think that we should not get rid of Lane Lambert. I'm team Lane Lambert. I want him as my coach this next season. And I want to see what he can do with a Botterill roster in 2027 or 26-27 season with a rebuilt roster, with an aggressive roster. Now, if they go all out and Lane Lambert struggles again and we're at the All-Star break or whatever halfway point of the season, we're at the trade deadline and we're sellers, okay, we should have a different story. But I think you have to bring him in this next season. You have to bring him in with full confidence. This next year is not a rebuilding year. This next year is you got to get into the playoffs, as weak as this Pacific division has been, especially if you plan on being aggressive in the offseason. And if Lane Lambert can't get you to the promised land and get you back into this postseason and the signs are not there, then yeah, you got to make a move. But I'm willing to be all in this offseason for Lane Lambert.
Yep. That's just to reiterate my initial statement. I am all in on Lane Lambert. I loved when he came in and you got to see kind of how this guy interacted with the team, and he was a no nonsense type of guy. That's what this team needs. They need a swift kick in the pants, and just you saw how well they started the year off, and it just kind of found its own turmoil throughout the season. I think he's the right guy to get this team going. We just didn't have all the pieces to get this thing done. But guys like Cabo Gacko, guys like Shane Wright, we have Berkeley Catton, who's still young. We have Matty Beniers. We have Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, who's a former draft pick for the boys. Bobby McCann, if we can bring him back. Jacob Melanson, who I am a fan of, he's kind of your grinder that's going to go out there and fight for the boys, and he can find his way into the net as well. You got Jaeger Furcus. You get some really good names coming up through the pipeline that I'm very, very, very excited to see kind of come through to fruition. And that was just one of the other questions. It left me kind of befuddled over this last year. Jaeger Furcus has just been on fire down in Coachella Valley, and they just never called them up, even though they've been in the hunt. They're still technically in the hunt. Or are they officially out right now? I
think they're officially out finally. And if
they're
not officially out, it's like they're hanging by strings.
But they had to lose 7 out of 8 games to get to that point, and they had a chance, after the Olympics, to call some of these guys up. And
yeah,
I don't know.
According to ESPN right now, there's no little E next to their name, but let's just put it into perspective here. Calgary's eliminated with 73 points, and Kraken have 75 points. So, I mean, they have to win out, and then, multiple things have to happen for them to it's not happening. Let's just keep that as it is. I think the best thing now, honestly, is, for the next, 5 games, is you
Mhm.
actually probably hope that you get the least amount of points and then hope you can get as down close as you can to the bottom of the standings for better lottery picks, because there are 3 to 4, maybe even 5 really good players sitting inside this NHL draft, which of course we're going to have some coverage here on the Frozen Deep. We're not just Kraken fans, we are hockey fans, folks. This is going to be a really fun podcast. Join along if you need to. Join and subscribe here at Up West Sports. If you're listening audio, this feed will be all Kraken for you. But look, I mean, you're only 5 points ahead of Chicago. You're only 3 points ahead of Calgary. If they get a couple wins and you fall down, I mean, you could be the second worst team in the West before when the season ends. I mean, you're not going to get close to obviously Vancouver, but like there's a chance. Well, there is a strong chance, a legit strong chance that you could have the second worst record in the league when this season is over. Like that is a strong possibility. And just a couple
And
weeks ago, you were potentially in the playoffs. That's how wild the West is right now.
the Wild Wild West is 100% exactly like that. We talked about the start of this year and everything, and how it started to where it's at now. And yeah,
You are
it is
currently tied for
crazy.
the fourth worst team with the Rangers right now.
Well,
And
and
technically, you're better than them because they have 2 games more on you. So
as a Mariners fan, I call this weird zone of just not making the playoffs and just, kind of having a good season, but not great season. I call it perpetual mediocrity. And we got to see with the Mariners for so many years where they have 80 plus wins, not get a top tier draft pick, and just barely miss the playoffs. And that's kind of where this season's leading us to be. Now, if they lose out and
this
they get
isn't
to this,
mediocre, though.
this is not mediocre. However, if they win a couple of games and just barely miss the postseason, they're sitting there, out of the top 10. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to see. And I believe is it this year? Or was it a future first round that they also collected at last year's deadline? That they collected a couple of draft picks that are some good ones for Yanni Gordon and company. So I'm excited to see what they get for these top tier draft picks that they've collected over the years. But yeah, it'd be nice at this point. You don't have the team to make a deep playoff run. It would be, I hate saying this because I hate losing, but it would be nice to see them get to as close to the top 5 picks so you can take a look at Gavin McKenna and some of these other really, really good names at the top.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. There's a lot to talk about over the next couple of days. There's a couple games left. For right now, the show is going to be weekly. But of course, if anything major happens, we're going to be popping up on the pod as well. So you might get some special shows. But if you want to listen in, if you want to become a subscriber, an OG to the Frozen Deep, we're going to be dropping stuff weekly. Probably next time we show up is probably when the season comes to an end. We got a couple games left of the season. We'll probably close out the year, get our final thoughts on what could happen, because I do think there's going to be maybe a couple other changes that happen. I don't think it's going to be like Jason Botterill, but I think there's still going to be enough to discuss. And of course, we got to talk free agency and so much more. Where do you think they end? Let's end there. They're not going to be the worst team in the league. They're not touching Vancouver. They have solidified themselves with 52 solid points. They are the worst. Right now, the Chicago Blackhawks are at 70. Calgary's at 73. The Rangers at 75, tied with Seattle. But the Rangers have 2 games already on them. Can they fall down to maybe being the third worst? I don't know if they catch Chicago, but I think you need to start rooting for the Rangers and the Flames over the next couple weeks. Next
Yeah,
couple days, I should say.
yeah, I'm definitely rooting for the Flames and the Rangers and whoever else can
Blackhawks.
kind of get to that. Yeah,
Those
the
3.
Blackhawks are 5 points behind right now. Hopefully Connor Bedard puts up a couple double hatties.
Yeah, go on a bender, Connor.
Yeah, and just kind of go off the rails there and keep doing what they're doing. But yeah, right now you're trying to lose a losing match to the Flames. That's the next big hurdle is the Flames.
Yeah, percentage could be good. Gavin McKenna, maybe, potentially at pick 3. I mean, could that happen if you get there? Well, I mean,
Bring him in.
yeah, it could
I'm
be
all
fun.
I'm all on board. I'm all aboard the Gavin train, as you can see right over here. Yeah, I can't point.
Young, young score. That'd be fun. All right, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for listening to the Frozen Deep. We'll see you back here next week on another episode of the Seattle Kraken's podcast, brand new, a new era, the Frozen Deep.